all over the world. Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% rate in April. Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences. Like the number of hybrid cars are registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million with this locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang. As it marks his first year in office, President Lee Jae-myung set out his agenda for year 2, pledging efforts to halt North Korea's nuclear development and channel resources into future growth sectors. South Korea's SK hynix has signed a multi-year technology agreement with Nvidia, deepening cooperation on next-generation memory technologies for AI. Chinese President Xi Jinping has kicked off a 2-day state visit to North Korea, his first in 7 years, in a move seen as reaffirming Beijing's influence in the region and beyond. We begin tonight with President Lee Jae-myung's press conference marking his first year in office. The president pledged to make Korea an irreplaceable nation and outlined a phased approach toward achieving denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. Our President Office correspondent Yoon Jang-min starts us off.
2026년 올해를 세계 어떤 나라도 대신할 수 없는 대체 불가 대한민국의 담대한 꿈이 시작되는 해로 만들겠습니다.
This was President Lee Jae-myung in a press conference on Monday at the Blue House, looking back on his 1 year in office and laying out what visions he has for the next year. Appearing in a tie representing his resolution from 1 year ago, he vowed to do his utmost in a nearly 3-hour-long press conference. On North Korea, he called for a halt in the regime's production of nuclear materials as a short-term goal and denuclearization as the long-term goal. President Lee assessed that Pyongyang continues making nuclear materials and upgrading its intercontinental ballistic missile capabilities to sustain the regime, even noting the possibility of exporting nuclear materials overseas.
저는 지금 현재 상태로 이 상황을 중단시키는 것만 해도 국제사회나 한반도에 도움이 된다고 생각해요. 그래서 제가 말씀드리는 것은 우리가 비핵화라는 목표를 포기하지 말자.
Acknowledging that the inter-Korean ties have hit lows in recent years, the South Korean commander-in-chief vowed to continue the peace drive. On excess tax revenue generated for a global AI boom, he vowed to use it to seek future growth engines, such as semiconductors, to boost growth.
그래서 초과세수는 저희 생각으로는 가장 중점적으로는 미래 세대를 위한 또 대한민국의 성장 잠재력을 키우는 방향에 투자를 해야 되겠다.
On the issue of distributing corporate windfall profits, which triggered recent wage disputes at Samsung Electronics, the president noted the need for a cautious approach.
해외의 유력한 첨단 기업들이 국내 투자를 꺼리게 되겠죠. 한국에 가면 연금 이익률이 높으면 그중에 일부를 떼어서 하라는 사회적 압력이 있어 라고 하게 되면 그런 부담 있는 나라에 투자하는 게 좀 망설여지지 않겠어요?
On curbing real estate speculation, he hinted at readjusting related tax rules in July. The president has been stressing the need for actual outcomes for this next year, as year 2 is deemed crucial within a 5-year South Korean presidential term. Yoon Jang-min, Arirang News.
And President Ijeong convened a meeting with key figures from Korea's executive, legislative, and judicial branches at the Blue House today, following the ballot shortage during last week's local elections. In his opening remarks, he described the incident as a very serious issue, saying it had failed to fully guarantee citizens a right to vote. According to Senior Presidential Secretary for Public Relations and Communication, Lee Kyu-yeon, the participants agreed on the need for a thorough investigation into the incident and reforms to the country's election administration. The meeting was attended by the National Assembly Speaker, the Chief Justice, the Constitutional Court President, and the Prime Minister. In other news, SK hynix has teamed up with Nvidia in a multi-year collaboration aimed at advancing cutting-edge memory solutions for AI factories. Our Kim Do-yeon tells us what this means.
A multi-year alliance between Nvidia and SK Group aims to build Asia's largest AI infrastructure. On Monday, Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang announced this agreement during his visit to SK hynix and added Korea is the ideal launchpad for physical AI.
The age of physical AI has finally arrived, and no country is better prepared for robotics than Korea. Incredible wealth of AI researchers, of course, the local expertise and the leadership of heavy industries and manufacturing here in Korea. The combination of these two capabilities makes Korea the ideal country to take advantage of artificial intelligence's next wave called physical AI and robotics.
At the center of this strategy is a four-pillar expansion to secure a global supply chain for tech partners like Microsoft. First, the alliance guarantees a stable memory supply aligned with Nvidia's roadmap. Second, they will co-develop next-generation memory for robotics. Third, they will deploy Nvidia software to accelerate chip simulations. Fourth, they will construct digital twin factories to automate manufacturing. Under this framework, SK Telecom will launch a gigawatt-class AI factory next year to become Asia's largest AI cloud provider. SK hynix will supply specialized memory for Nvidia's upcoming Vera Rubin supercomputers, Vera CPUs, Jetson Thor robotics, and RTX Spark PCs. SK Group says the deal shifts their relationship from a supply contractor to an alliance.
We are now elevating our partnership to a broader collaboration between SK Group and Nvidia. There are two main points. First, we will build future AI factories together. Second, we will share the joint R&D roadmaps we are developing with Nvidia.
By synchronizing R&D roadmaps, SK Group integrates directly into Nvidia's expanding hardware ecosystem, cementing its position at the top of the Asian supply chain. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In the meantime, Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang's every move here in Korea has drawn widespread attention as he meets with business leaders and connects with the public in his trademark down-to-earth style. Our Park Jun-han has more.
Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang's trip to Korea is coming to a close, but during his visit, he has met with several AI industry leaders and taken part in a series of public-friendly events.
After arriving in Korea, Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang's first stop wasn't a major tech exhibition or a closed-door meeting with corporate leaders. Instead, he went to a PC Bang, the local name for an internet cafe.
For Nvidia, Korean PC Bangs hold a special meaning. Huang has already said that Korea's esports culture and PC Bangs played a foundational role in Nvidia's early growth, both at an event with T1's Faker last Friday and during the APEC Summit last November.
Nvidia, GeForce, and Korea esports grew up together. So I loved you for a long time. Thank you.
If his last visit was famous for fried chicken and beer, this trip was packed with an even wider array of grassroots marketing. On Friday evening, he enjoyed samgyeopsal, or Korean pork belly, and somek, a mix of soju and beer, with the heads of SK LG and Neighbor's founder. On Saturday, he filmed an episode for a popular Korean talk show, You Quiz on the Block. On Sunday, he threw the ceremonial first pitch at a Tucson Bears baseball game alongside the Tucson Group's chairman before heading back to his favorite fried chicken spot, Ganbu Chicken, that evening. But these moves were more than just friendly PR, with the Nvidia CEO also laying out concrete business commitments with Korean tech leaders. Huang announced that he had brought 4 gifts aimed at creating new business opportunities in Korea, including plans to establish a new Nvidia research center.
I brought 4 new businesses to Korea. Vera Rubin, Vera, RTX Spark, and our Jensen Thor.
With Jensen Huang promising to return to Korea more frequently, investors are eyeing what this strategic friendship will yield next. Park Junan, Arirang News.
And meanwhile, growing concerns that the memory chip supercycle may be nearing its peak sparked a sharp sell-off on Monday, sending South Korean stocks and the won sharply lower during trading. Kim Jun-hong reports.
Panic selling swept through Korea's financial markets on Monday, dragging stocks lower and pushing the Korean won to a 17-year low. The benchmark KOSPI closed at 7,484.41, down 8.29% from the previous session. Just 3 minutes into trading, the KOSPI triggered a circuit breaker after falling more than 8%. Trading was halted for 20 minutes, with the index at around the 7,470 mark when the curb took effect. The secondary KOSDAQ also closed down over 9% after triggering a sell-side sidecar and later a circuit breaker during the session. Monday's sell-off came after a major global investment bank warned last week that the memory chip cycle could peak sooner than expected. The report triggered a sharp decline in U.S. semiconductor stocks, spilling over into Korean markets. Pressure also persisted in the currency market, with the $1 exchange rate closing the regular session at 1,535 won to the dollar. Earlier in the day, the exchange rate opened at 1,552.2 won, up more than 16 won from the previous session. This marked the highest opening level since the global financial crisis in 2009. Korea's energy import dependence has long left the won vulnerable to external shocks, while continued foreign selling of Korean stocks has further weighed on the currency. Renewed expectations of further Fed rate hikes also lent support to the dollar on Monday.
Markets are scaling back expectations for Federal Reserve rate cuts after U.S. employment data for May and the previous 2 months were revised upward. That has supported the dollar and weighed further on the Korean won.
Also on Monday, the Bank of Korea and the Ministry of Finance and Economy warned they would not tolerate excessive volatility or disorderly market moves that stray from underlying fundamentals. They added that speculative trading appears to have amplified recent exchange rate swings. Kim Jun-hong, Arirang News.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has kicked off a rare 2-day state visit to North Korea, which is his first trip to Pyongyang in 7 years, amid growing regional attention over Beijing's ties with the North. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young looks at the significance behind the closely watched visit.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for closer diplomatic and military ties with North Korea in a summit with regime leader Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang. According to Beijing's state media People's Daily, Xi and Kim began their sit-down meeting on Monday evening at the Kumsusan State Guesthouse at around 6 p.m. Korea time. During the meeting, Xi was reported to have said that China and North Korea should strengthen exchanges and cooperation in areas including diplomacy, law enforcement, and the military. This marks the Chinese leader's first trip to North Korea in 7 years. Ahead of the visit, Xi contributed to a front-page article in North Korea's ruling party newspaper, the Rodong Sinmun, to call for closer strategic coordination between Beijing and Pyongyang, deeming their friendship unbreakable. He said they should jointly promote a multipolar world and inclusive economic globalization, while defending the international system centered on the United Nations.
From China's perspective, rather than specific agenda items, the visit comes after the U.S.-China summit and the China-Russia summit. So China wants to send an external message that it is leading the East Asian Security Order, or even the broader global diplomatic and security order. For Beijing, there is actually not much to ask of Pyongyang.
However, from North Korea's perspective, it still needs China's political and economic support.
North Korea's biggest concern is how to secure Chinese support once the Russia-Ukraine war eventually comes to an end. One example is the Wonsan Karma Resort project, which Kim Jong-un has personally prioritized. For that project to succeed, North Korea needs large numbers of Chinese tourists.
But the biggest question is, how far is China willing to engage North Korea on nuclear issues?
China has absolutely no reason to aggressively push a denuclearization agenda. Seoul appears to be hoping that China can play a mediating role and help revive North Korea-US dialogue and even inter-Korean dialogue. We place a lot of expectations on mediation, but I do not think China is willing at this point to bear that burden.
On Sunday, the North Korean leader's powerful sister Kim Yo-jong said Pyongyang's status as a nuclear weapon state was an irreversible reality, and that no outside pressure would change that fact. The Unification Ministry said Monday that it will not make assumptions at this point about whether Kim and Xi may take steps to recognize the North as a nuclear state. The ministry said it will closely watch the outcome of the talks as they unfold. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
North Korea is estimated to possess around 60 nuclear warheads as of January 2026, 10 more than last year, according to the Swiss think tank, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute on Monday. And the institute explained that North Korea may have produced enough fissile material to manufacture up to 90 nuclear warheads. However, the actual number of assembled warheads is believed to be lower, likely around 60 at most. Now, as for China, the report said Beijing possessed around 620 nuclear warheads as of January this year, which is an increase of 20 from the previous year. It also noted that China expanded its operational nuclear development, with the number of warheads deployed rising from 24 last year to 34 this year. The fragile ceasefire in the Middle East is facing renewed pressure as the tensions between Iran and Israel continue to rise. U.S. President Donald Trump called for an immediate halt of mutual attacks, while Iran said the U.S. is responsible for the recent Israeli attacks. Our Park Kwon-woo has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump said in a social media post on Monday that Israel and Iran must stop shooting immediately, as Israel and Iran have been trading fire on Sunday and into Monday. Iran warned Monday that the U.S. would bear responsibility for any escalation in the Middle East caused by Israel. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghai said during a press briefing that recent developments had cast a shadow over ongoing negotiations with Washington.
These developments in the past 24 hours will certainly intensify suspicions. Even now, we have been exchanging messages with the American side in an atmosphere of extremely deep mistrust. Without any doubt, as I have said, it is impossible to separate the actions of the Zionist regime in the region from U.S. policies.
This comes as the Israeli Defense Forces said it has completed a large-scale strike targeting strategic defense systems in Iran. IDF said dozens of fighter jets took part dismantling key defense capabilities and expanding Israel's operational freedom in Iranian airspace. The Israeli military said the fighting could continue for several more days and that it remains prepared for a prolonged campaign. It added that Iran fired around 30 ballistic missiles toward Israel overnight, all of which were either intercepted or fell in open areas. According to Iranian news agency Mehr, Iranian air defenses have also downed a drone that was flying over Tehran. Yemen's Houthi rebels also launched attacks toward Israel and warned they would target Israel-linked vessels in the Red Sea, raising concerns of a wider regional conflict. With hostilities continuing across the region, attention's now on whether the conflict will escalate further or whether it could ease through diplomatic efforts. Park Kwon-woo, Arirang News.
Still, a key obstacle in U.S.-Iran ceasefire talks remains Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium. President Donald Trump says Washington intends to secure and eliminate it with or without a deal. Lee Seung-jae reports.
President Donald Trump says the United States is close to reaching a deal with Iran to end the 3-month conflict between the two countries. but insists any agreement must permanently prevent Tehran from obtaining nuclear weapons. In an interview with NBC's Meet the Press, Trump said that if a deal is reached, the U.S. would work alongside Iran to retrieve and destroy its stockpile of highly enriched uranium. He said the material could either be destroyed on site or removed and disposed of elsewhere under American supervision. However, Trump warned that if negotiations fail, Washington would take further military action against Iran and continue degrading its military capabilities before moving to secure the uranium independently. He stressed that the U.S. would ensure the operation could be carried out safely, with or without Iranian cooperation. Trump also highlighted America's surveillance capabilities, saying U.S. Space Force assets can closely monitor Iran's nuclear facilities using advanced space-based technology. The president described the two sides as very close to an agreement, but said he is seeking tougher language in the proposed deal. According to Trump, Iran has already agreed not to develop nuclear weapons, but he wants additional provisions barring Tehran from purchasing, acquiring, or otherwise obtaining nuclear weapons from outside sources. Trump said Iranian negotiators initially resisted the demand, but eventually softened their opposition. He also offered a rare assessment of Iran's new leadership following the deaths of former Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and several senior officials during the conflict. Trump described the new leadership as more rational and pragmatic and said Khamenei's son, Mojtaba Khamenei, is involved in the approval process for any agreement. Trump added that he remains open to direct talks with Iran's new supreme leader as negotiations continue. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The World Cup gets underway this week. For more on Korea's preparations, chances and expectations, we have our sports editor Paul Neate in the studio with us. Hello, Paul.
Hello there.
So, Paul, the World Cup begins this week. Korea's preparations must be more or less complete, right?
Right, yes. They arrived at their base camp in Mexico on Saturday. They touched down in Guadalajara, and at around 4 p.m. local time, were greeted by fans and locals who'd gathered outside the hotel where the team is staying. But it was strictly business, as none of the players stopped for autographs when they got off the bus. The arrival there means that Korea will have 6 days at their base camp ahead of the first game. But their preparations began on May 18th, arriving in the US for a pre-camp of sorts. They face Czechia on Thursday at 7 p.m. local time in Guadalajara, or 11 a.m. Friday Korea time. It'll be the first time the two countries have met in a competitive game. The last meeting goes back to 2016 with Korea winning 2-1. They'll wear their red home kit for this one.
So their first game in a decade.
Yeah.
And the team spent a long time in the U.S. before moving to Mexico. They had 2 friendlies there.
Yeah.
What do those matches tell us about what sort of lineup we might see this Friday?
Right, well, it looks like we will see that back 3 system. This was a setup used in both friendly games. Head coach Hong Myung-bo used a 4-2-3-1 for much of the qualification phase, but sees an extra centre-back with wing-backs as the way to go for the World Cup finals against stronger opposition. Now, in terms of personnel, looking at who played in the 2 friendly matches, the surprise inclusion Lee Gi-hyuk looks to be set to start at left centre-back alongside Kim Min-jae and Lee Han-bom. Jens Kastrup may get the nod at left wing-back with captain Son Heung-min as a central striker. Now, while the formation was a focus in the US, the team spent 3 weeks in Salt Lake City, Utah, to adjust to the altitude, as it is similar to Guadalajara. Management saw this as a priority rather than facing top-class opponents.
I see. Then, Paul, what are the expectations? I mean, how far can Korea go this time?
Well, the head coach says that the main target is just to get to the round of 32. This is the expanded World Cup, of course, with 48 teams. But then they'll sort of get to the round of 32 and then take it from there. That's the first knockout round. But the data company Opta has given Korea a 70% chance of reaching the round of 32 and 33% chance of reaching the round of 16, but just 12% of reaching the quarters. The top 2 go through in each group, and the best placed teams that finish third will also go through. Korea have only reached the first knockout stage 3 times and just twice on foreign soil. But fans seem optimistic, at least looking at the number of people who said they'll be tuning in.
Right.
A survey by the Korea Broadcast Advertising Corporation found that 68.6% said they would be watching the matches live, despite the game starting at 11 a.m. and 10 a.m.
I'll be one of the 68.6% people, Paul.
Me too.
Now, I understand there are some rule changes this year. Tell us more.
Yeah, quite a few, mainly aimed at speeding the game up. For instance, players will have just 5 seconds to take a throw-in or a goal kick and 10 seconds to get off the pitch when being subbed off. Also, if a goalkeeper goes down injured, players are not allowed to go over to the touchline to see the coach for instructions. Players are also banned from putting their hands, arms or shirts over their mouths to remove the chance of anything untoward being said towards another player. Also, VAR will have an expanded scope. It can look at corners, attacking fouls, and can overrule a second yellow card if the referee has made an error. There's also a hydration break for 3 minutes in the middle of each half.
Well, lots to look forward to. Let's hope Korea begin with the win. Thanks for that, Paul.
Thank you. Yeah.
Rain that began this morning in the eastern parts of the country will taper off by this evening. For the next several days, Korea will remain under the influence of cooler, drier air moving down from the north, so temperatures are not expected to rise significantly. As we move through the week, atmospheric instability will increase as cooler air from the north interacts with warmer air to the south, bringing a higher chance of showers on several days. So if you're heading outside, keep a small umbrella handy. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 16 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon at 13 degrees, Gwangju at 15 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 28 degrees, Daegu at 30 degrees, Busan at 25 degrees. Skies will clear nationwide starting tomorrow, but as atmospheric conditions become more unstable, showers will occur frequently in many regions. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That's all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
The magical door to the world of K-animation is swinging wide open. Meet your instant new BFF, the adorable Catch. Tina Ping will have you hooked from the very first glance. Need a hand? Our Robocar Poli Rescue team is always zooming in to save the day. How about tagging along on Pinkfong and Pal's super exciting quest to reclaim their lost magic? With the mysterious life forms Cabion by your side, you can become a Cabion master and save humanity like a total hero. Protecting children's innocence while igniting their boundless imaginations. That's the magic of Korean animation. K-animation, the ultimate bestie for kids worldwide.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. Earlier today, President Lee Jae-myung held a major press conference marking his first year in office, highlighting his administration's achievements so far and outlining key priorities for the year ahead. From economy and housing market to diplomacy, security, and North Korea policy, the president presented his vision for the second year of his presidency. To help us unpack the key takeaways and what they could mean going forward, we connect with two experts tonight. And first, let's begin with the economic agenda. And for that, we invite Professor Kim Min-gyun of Seogang Business School. A very big welcome.
Hi, good evening.
So, Professor, like you said, President Lee today, he highlighted the KOSPI surpassing 8,000 and his AI and semiconductor initiatives as key economic achievements for his first year in office. Despite that, concerns still remain over weak consumer sentiment and the strong dollar. How would you assess the administration's economic performance over the year?
Well, I have to mention about the score of the KOSPI. Well, always we already mentioned about the KOSPI is undervalued all the time. We're comparing with the growth of our economy as well as our size of economy for the whole of the world. But so especially for before he became president, because if we're going to compare the KOSPI index, well, it increased by about 5,000. It over 8,000. Already, but of course there are some drops on today, but I think it's kind of another huge achievement in economic policy. But as you know, there is a lot of events during his first year, of course, that we have the Middle East crisis, so that we are dealing with a high price of oil right now. But even though those kind of accident in external environment, I think he's doing very good to manage our economy as well as they trying to go for the growth, especially with AI and the semiconductor industry.
Right. So we have seen such kind of accomplishments over the year. When we look ahead now, Professor, President Lee, he identified future industries, economic recovery, and reducing inequality and key priorities for his second year. Given the limited resources we have, where do you think the government should focus its efforts first?
I think they're trying to go for the future growth opportunity. For future growth opportunity, I think it's kind of they're trying to set the directions for the Korea economy, and they're trying to boost up those kind of economy based on those kind of future economic growth. But future economic growth is basically with our young generation, where they're trying to look for those jobs and they're trying to look for the education. I think it's kind of a very good direction for the economy, for the Koreans' economic future. But indeed, well, we are dealing with a lot of issues like real estate issues. Of course, there's high price, and of course, we are dealing with high inflation. But if we're trying to make sure that we're going to set the directions, including AI and any other semiconductor industry for the future growth, I think the roadmap that we're trying to set up for our economy is kind of very critical, especially for we're looking for the future growth. But we are doing very well for the AI and industry, AI and semiconductor industry. But I think future education is the most important topic that they trying to set up for President Lee.
Future industries, that area would also be very crucial. Now, when we go back to the stocks market, Professor, President Lee also argued that Korean stocks still remain quite undervalued despite, the KOSPI topping 8,000. I wonder if you agree with this, and also, what do you think will it take for the stock market gains to actually translate into stronger jobs, incomes, and consumption?
I guess this might kind of be my forecast, but I think there is still room for growth for especially it's going over the 10,000 KOSPI index. I think there is another room. But when you think about those kind of challenges, and of course we are going for those kind of numbers, of course, then we are not going to defend on the numbers for the KOSPI. We're actually looking for the actual growth of the economy for our, for our future, of course. So basically, we are dealing with a lot of issues. Of course, the inflation, of course. The war between Iran and USA, of course, is not over yet. So we are dealing with the high price of oil right now. So those kind of issues has to be solved for, we're trying to go for the maybe 10,000 KOSPI index, of course.
And now the challenge could be turning it into broader benefits as well. Now, let's also touch upon housing. President Lee signaled both stronger property taxes and expanded supply as well. Do you think these measures outlined today can help stabilize the real estate market in the country?
Of course, they're trying to, basically maintain the current price of the real estate, especially when it's trying to go for the control the demand. But I think another issue that we're trying to look for real estate is kind of supply side. Of course, in the Seoul metropolitan areas, of course, there's always high demand for those kind of who looking for the house or who looking for the apartment, of course. But for the government issues, of course, that we're trying to control the demand, well, it's kind of hard task that we're trying to have. But when you're trying to look for the supply, well, of course, it's going to take a lot of time. And it's going to take a lot of policy, of course, the regulation. There are many issues that we're trying to maintain, to speed up those kind of supply. But even though we're trying to look for those kind of supplies, well, if you go for those kind of eliminate those kind of regulation, and we're trying to go for those kind of boost up the industry, the construction industry, I think where government is trying to look for those kind of side, not the demand side, but the supply side. If they can speed up those kind of supply side, I think demand will be satisfied with those kind of supply. So the real estate, of course, the supply and demand, well, I think they're trying to put more effort on the supply side instead of the demand.
Now, finally, Professor, President Lee has pledged to strengthen AI, semiconductors, robotics, and other future industries to make Korea a leading technology powerhouse. And you also mentioned it's quite important moving forward. What should be the government's most urgent priority in achieving that kind of goal?
Well, if you look at all this media in the Korea, where of course the CEO of the Nvidia, of course, the Jensen Huang is here in Korea, of course. He the mention about those kind of our future, like where they trying to say I don't want to mention the specific companies, but he also mentioned about the physical AI, of course. A lot of Korean companies are trying to put a lot of investment in the physical AI industry. Well, I think it's another good point that the Korean's direction, of course, because we're looking for those kind of R&D, research and development in the physical industry, and we have resources, of course, that we have a heavy workforces that they can work on those kind of physical AI industry. Well, I think it's kind of the future that we're going to be there. And of course, that we have some infrastructure, and government is, of course, they're trying to infrastructure for the electricity, and they're trying to eliminate those kind of regulation. Of course, they're trying to go for all this kind of the supporting law as a government, of course, and trying to boost those kind of the AI and the next, of course, the physical AI industry, and of course, with the synergy impact for the our semiconductor industry, I think it's gonna show some bright future for our Korean's economy.
And that's really where Korea's long-term competitiveness may also be decided. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Professor Kim.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Now, turning to foreign policy, President Lee also used today's press conference to outline his vision for Korea's role on the global stage and his administration's diplomatic priorities for the year ahead. And for more on this, we connect to Andrew Millard, head of the Department of International Relations at Changwon National University. Professor Millard, thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you for having me again.
So let's start right away. So in today's conference, President Lee, he emphasized a globally responsible Korea and pragmatic diplomacy centered on national interests. I wonder what message stood out for you the most?
Okay, so I think overall, President Lee's speech today, it was a pretty safe speech when it comes to foreign policy and so on. So I think a lot of people won't be disappointed by what he said, but I also don't think there'll be any jaws dropping around the world either. So I think relatively safe. Now, what we have to remember is when President Lee came into office a year ago, his priorities were very different back then. So back then, it was very much about re-establishing Korea on the global stage. And at the time, President Lee was coming into a very volatile global situation. We had Donald Trump, who had been in office for around 6 months by that point, and Donald Trump was really getting into sort of his tariff war, ramping up a lot of pressure on states around the world, including South Korea, trying to get them to sign these various trade agreements. Now, basically over time, that's kind of waned off a little bit more because of sort of the Supreme Court decision which overruled that. But that was a huge pressure against President Lee. And then, of course, you also had the Korea-Japan relations to consider. A lot of people expecting that a democratic president would come in and bring up some of the old sort of historical ideas. But actually, President Lee very quickly, even before he went to America on the way, he went to Japan first to show them, look, we're a slightly different government. We want to have good relations with Japan and also strengthen the US Korea-Japan security agreement and so on. And then you also had the relations with China to consider. You have North Korea, which is now in a very different position than it used to be. So you have all of these positions, but now the honeymoon period, it's over. And so really today was about setting, really for President Lee's goals for his time in office. And what he's basically trying to do is say, look, we have America, we have China, we also have the European Union, we have various partners around the world, but we also want to play a leading role. How can we do that? Through norms-based ideas. So he talked a lot about sovereignty, but also human rights and things like that. And this is very important because this is basically saying, from now on, it doesn't matter whether an issue is related to China or whether it's related to the US or whether it's related to Europe. From the Korean perspective, if it follows our principles, we will support it. If it doesn't follow our principles, we will object to it, we will criticize it. And so I think that's very important. And really the key slogan of irreplaceable Korea, 대체 불가능 대한민국, this one for me, very important. This shows that President Lee, he now really wants to step up Korea, not just as some sort of actor, a middle state actor, but now as really a regional and a global actor in various different industries.
Right, so it really set the tone for his plans for the year ahead as well. Now, he also raised some of his ambitions, like revising the Korea-US nuclear agreement, acquiring nuclear-powered submarines, and regaining wartime OPCON as well. Professor, how can Korea expand its strategic autonomy while also maintaining a strong alliance with Washington?
So here we have two very different issues. I mean, they're both security related. But we have the nuclear power submarines. This is a relatively new topic, but then OPCON is an issue that has been going on now for quite a few years. So I'll mention OPCON first. If we go back to 2015, this is when we created the conditions-based OPCON transition plan, COTP. And in this plan, basically they agreed, both the US and Korea will push for a transition back to Korea regaining
operational control in wartime, but we'll do it in a staged process. So starting off with initial operationability control capability, then full operational capability, then full mission capability. And so for the Koreans, what they're saying now is in 2025, 10 years since we've had this conditions-based idea, now Korea is ready to take control. So you see the Koreans actually saying, you know what, if we could have control today, no problem. We are capable of doing that. But then you have the Americans say, this is maybe a little bit more political rather than capability driven. And so you see a little difference. And really the difference is not whether they will transfer operational control, but really when. The Koreans are pushing for a quicker transfer, where America, they're looking more around 2029, so a slightly later one, less political. Now, when it comes to nuclear submarine issues, this one, again, relatively new. They're working very closely on this. I think a lot of progress is being made. The big issue will just come with the fuel, with the uranium enrichment, and this will require the 123 agreement to be revised, which means it must go also through the US Congress, which will slow down things. And then also in terms of non-proliferation, once that's agreed, they'll also have to show it basically to China, Russia, and the others as well. So there's a few issues, but on the whole, really a lot of good progress being made in both of those areas.
Now, Professor, another thing that was notable today was that President Lee, it quite lacked any direct reference to North Korea or denuclearization. How would you read into that?
So for President Lee, this is really a very difficult situation because, let's be honest, what does he really have to say? There's been no major change. So when he came into office a year ago, he was really going to try and re-establish dialogue with North Korea. But as I mentioned before, North Korea's position, it's changed incredibly. North Korea doesn't need South Korea, doesn't need dialogue. So it doesn't really want to come back to the table. So this is one area where President Lee has not made any progress. But also, we know that for North Korea, their position is they will not give up give up nuclear weapons. They will not denuclearize. And so for President Lee, if he mentions denuclearization, then the North Koreans just don't listen. And again, there's no dialogue. If President Lee mentions engagement with the North, then potentially inside South Korea, he's going to face a lot of domestic pushback as well. So again, there's really not so much that he can focus on. And so he left it out, I think maybe strategically, but answered a couple of questions in the press conference. He had really no other choice.
Right. Then, so amid this situation with North Korea, what do you think could be the main focus of the Lee administration's North Korea policy in the second year?
So I think you really have to take a very realistic look and say, I mean, the North Koreans, they've been very clear on this. They don't want reunification. They are not giving up their nuclear weapons. South Korea basically just has to accept this and basically come up with a new strategy of somehow trying to engage with the North. Now, what they could do is basically try and ignore North Korea, ignore Pyongyang. What they've done in the past is basically they've done things and looked for the North Korean response. How is North Korea reacting to these different policies and issues and things? What they need to do is, say, look, okay, North Korea, you do your own thing. We will build South Korea, again, focus on irreplaceable Korea, strengthen these different areas, and try to find some ways, possibly through Beijing. So it's very interesting to see if President Xi will be mentioning South-North Korea relations in his visit to Pyongyang at the moment. Potentially, it could also be through America. We know that Donald Trump would be very happy to have a summit with Chairman Kim. But again, in that case, President Lee would have to be quite careful that they don't get pushed out by the US and it becomes just symbolic rather than substantive. But generally, they need a very realistic approach in the future.
Right. So Really, there's a lot of things going on when it comes to foreign policy with the Lee administration, U.S.-China rivalry, and the deadlock with North Korea, and deepening ties with North Korea, China, and Russia as well. So what do you think will be the biggest factor that will shape the success of the administration's foreign policy in its second year?
I think you kind of just hit the nail on the head there. There's a lot going on, but there's really, I don't think there's one specific thing that will define success. I mean, of course, on the whole, like if we come back again to this balancing act, that on the one hand, through security issues, especially now with nuclear-powered submarines and things like that, America is really still the key player. And actually, President Lee, over the past year, he has been tending slightly more towards the US than China. But he also now has this problem. If he continues to play this sort of balancing act between the two, maybe both Beijing and Washington are going to start seeing this as a bit of a sign of weakness. Maybe they're going to lose a bit of trust in Seoul. So he really does need to start focusing a little bit more. So I think this idea of strengthening South Korea, not trying to work towards either one or the other partners, but strengthening South Korea, becoming a little bit more autonomous. I really think this is actually the best strategy that South Korea can have. Now, the question is, can they achieve this going forward? That's $1 million question. We don't know the answer yet, but I think if he can achieve it, this is likely to be the best outcome all around.
Right, so we will be definitely looking forward to a more autonomous and stronger Korea in the year ahead. But as for now, we'll have to conclude our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Professor Millard.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.